Okay, we'll get started. Thank you for joining us for the 2021 Pride Power 100 celebration. My name is Brian Elner, and I'm an EVP at BCW, which is a global communications firm and part of WPP. I will be the MC tonight. I have worked with so many of you over the years on the fight for equality, especially on the New York marriage win, which it's hard to imagine was 10 years ago this week, and not to date all of us, but it's nice that we were in high school then, so we're all still very young. We have made a lot of progress since then, and thanks in part to all of you. Yesterday, we had an NFL player come out to a lot of celebration, but I just want to say we still have a lot of work to do. We need to pass the Equality Act, and all of us need to get involved in fighting back against the cruel, mean-spirited, anti-transgender laws that we've seen pop up in over 30 states over the last year, the worst year ever, according to the Human Rights Campaign. So I want to urge everyone to please stay in the fight, do what you're doing. Of course, we wish we could all be in person to celebrate this great group of leaders, but like many events this year, Zoom will have to suffice. City and State New York is going to be posting the link to the profiles of all who made the list in the chat. So feel free to look through it, read a bit more about your fellow honorees. And City and State New York will also be recognizing those on the power list with a presentation towards the end of this Zoom. I want to thank the sponsors who helped City and State New York make this event possible. Thank you to the Ollie Forney Center, TD Bank, Charter Spectrum, East Midtown Partnership, Google, and Harlem United. A couple very quick housekeeping items. Within Zoom, most of you are probably very familiar with it by now, unfortunately, but within Zoom, you have the option to change your screen to either gallery or speaker view. Also, feel free to submit questions to the Q&A at the bottom of the screen. If you have a question for any of our keynote speakers, and time permitting, we hope to get to some of them, if not all of them. And feel free to use the chat to congratulate or speak with any of the Pride Power 100, to comment amongst each others on any topics that you wish to do. And with that, I'm going to get to our first speaker of the night. I want to introduce Alex Camarda, the Director of Government Affairs at Charter Communications. Alex works on government relations issues and legislative matters for the company for New York City, New Jersey, and states in the Northeast. Please join me virtually in welcoming Alex.
Thanks so much, Brian, and good evening. My name is Alex Camarda, and I'm Spectrum's Director of Government Affairs for our company's New York City region. Thanks all for joining us. Tonight, we recognize the outstanding and influential work of 100 individuals who have made a significant impact on the LGBTQIA+ community. It's more important than ever to share stories of the community, show representation, and acknowledge that while progress has been made, there's still work that needs to be done. That's why one of the ways Spectrum is celebrating Pride Month is by offering customers an on-demand collection of movies highlighting LGBTQIA+ stories. More generally, we honor the accomplishments of the gay rights movement, celebrate the culture of the community, and highlight the importance of inclusion in the workplace. As the leading provider of TV, internet, and phone services in an area as unique as New York City, Spectrum knows firsthand the importance of diversity and inclusion in all aspects of our business. Our vision is to leverage the full diversity of our people and partners to make a meaningful difference for our customers, company, and communities. One of our top priorities is the commitment to advancing diversity and inclusion throughout the company, including our workforce, to ensure that we can better understand and respond to the needs of our customers. We're proud our workforce reflects the full range of diversities and abilities in the markets we serve, and we're actively working to promote diversity at every level of our organization. And I'm happy and proud to mention that our company sponsors an internal LGBTQ employee resource group, one of 5 such groups that support employees with shared characteristics, life experiences, and interests to advance our culture of inclusion and drive business success. We foster an inclusive environment where employees feel respected, engaged, and able to reach their full potential. It's important for us to embrace the unique perspectives and experiences of our employees and our partners. We recognize that successful diversity and inclusion integration requires interfacing at all levels of the organization, beginning with our executive leadership team. That's why in 2017, we appointed a Chief Diversity Officer, whose team is focused on developing and implementing the company's diversity and inclusion efforts and initiatives. This includes ensuring our marketing and programming efforts align with the interests of our customers, offering products and services to an increasingly diverse customer base, and supplier diversity. In addition, we work together with a variety of organizations that do impactful, meaningful work for our communities and neighborhood through grants and in-kind support. For example, we've opened 40 Spectrum Learning Labs at nonprofit and community organizations throughout New York City. Each learning lab comes fully equipped with state-of-the-art computers and other peripheral equipment to provide computer access and learning opportunities, all powered by Spectrum's high-speed internet service. In fact, a Spectrum Learning Lab is located at the Harlem location of the Ali Forney Center, an organization dedicated to serving homeless and runaway LGBTQ youth. We fulfill the company's commitment to improving communities and impacting lives where our customers and employees live, work, and play through initiatives like our Spectrum Housing Assist initiative, Spectrum Digital Education Grants, and Spectrum Employee Community Grants. We're part of the community. Our offices are here. A vast majority of our employees live in the communities we serve, and we are continuously investing in the local community. We're honored to be part of this evening's event. Congratulations to everyone on the City and State's 2021 Pride Power 100 list. And with that, I'll turn it back over to Brian.
Thank you, Alex. So I'm going to be a little bit like, I guess, Diana Ross at the Super Bowl. As you can see, my background's changed from those of you who were on earlier. From my apartment to what is the Proud Pronoun Project. And I just want to take a little bit of MC license and very quickly say that I mentioned that my firm, BCW, is part of WPP. And one of our other companies, VMLY&R, has launched this Proud Pronoun Project, which is a simple tool where you can display your gender, personal gender pronouns with coworkers, clients, and friends in a really beautiful way over Zooms and Teams. It's customizable, it's free, and it's available to all of you at the proudpronounproject.com. So I will put that in the chat and you can have your own pronoun background. And with that, back to the program, I get to introduce someone who with this crowd really, truly needs no introduction. Emma Wolf. As Deputy Mayor for Administration and Chief of Staff, Emma Wolf advises and assists the mayor regarding all planning and external affairs, oversees the day-to-day operations of the mayor's executive office, and supervises and coordinates the operations of a portfolio of mayoral agencies. This has obviously been an extraordinary year for our city, and really excited to hear what Emma has to say. And with that, I will disappear and turn it over. Welcome. Oh, I think you're on mute.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes, perfect.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yes, no?
You're on. We hear you great.
You can. Okay, great. All right. Thank you so much, Brian. It's great to see you. And thanks for all you've been doing and the tremendous work, and especially over this last year and change here. And greetings to all my colleagues. I wish I could see all of you. I remember standing with so many of you years ago in a crowded room Lots of us, all, sweaty and excited and proud to be able to stand together. And I do miss that so much, but it's nice knowing that so many of you are out there and that soon enough we'll be able to celebrate together again and be proud together again. And I think it's wonderful what City and State is doing. And also, of course, want to thank all the sponsors that have helped put this together. I think some of my colleagues in government are on, some of my colleagues, particularly in the administration, certainly State Senator Hoyleman and Speaker Corey Johnson and all the council members, and I don't know if Danny Drum and others are on here, but it's been an honor and a pleasure to work with them and to see how much they've fought for over these decades and where they've really helped to bring this city. And I think all of us feel that sense of pride from when many of them first were elected and where we are today as a city and nationally. And of course, I think so many of us take pride in seeing our city on the forefront of change that we wanted to see happen both everywhere domestically and across the globe. And I also have some great colleagues in the de Blasio administration on, certainly my colleagues from CCHR, including the commissioner, and Ash, who so many of you know and have worked with from the Unity Project, has done just incredible work. And especially over this past year, I've gotten to work a lot with my colleague, Jason Littman, so many of you know from Community Affairs, and the Director of Events in our administration. And it's been a long journey, and it's my last year, at least, in the de Blasio administration, everybody's last year in the de Blasio administration. It's been a real pleasure to work along with these colleagues. Also, of course, Mitch Katz, who would always be getting a shout out, but boy, did he do the city proud as the leader of our public hospital system when we were at literally the epicenter of a global pandemic, and the public hospital system that had been counted out many, many years ago and left for dead. Mitch and so many others helped revive, and Mitch has done so much, not just in battling COVID, but to address the needs of the LGBT community, particularly youth, over these last couple of years. It's really been a privilege to work alongside him. So apologies for going on and on about my colleagues, but I can't help but get a bit sentimental in this last year here, and getting to work with so many of you as advocates and allies. So thank you again, and it's always an honor. I'm looking back at this last year and a half, and I don't honestly think I thought in June of 2021 I'd be sitting here happily celebrating the fact that Pride is back, that New York City is back, but here we are. It's been quite the turnaround, and we've been able to recover and start to get back on our feet, but our recovery has to be about more than just getting back to where we were, but about furthering our recovery for all of our communities, and especially our LGBTQ communities. We have so much more to do, and we are still the city with the largest LGBTQ community and the largest transgender community in the United States. So it's kind of our job, if you just go by pure population size, to be at the forefront. I just want to say a few things that we've done in the de Blasio administration, because I think to not recognize them would be doing folks a disservice, but then to talk a little bit about what we're doing right now. And when I say we, I certainly mean we, my colleagues in government, and certainly Ash and the Unity Project are really at the cutting edge and doing all we can here. A few things. So first, when we first came in the first term, we signed historic legislation We created a third gender category. A lot of you will remember this. It was very momentous. On New York City's birth certificates, it meant the world to so many. We published the first ever LGBTQIA healthcare Bill of Rights, and we mandated bathroom access for transgender New Yorkers in city buildings. And of course, over the last few years, and I'm so glad, along with all of us here, that we can say that we no longer have to do this, but for a tough 4 years, we had to fight back against the Trump administration's homophobic, transphobic policies, in which we did arm in arm with not just folks inside the city, but with other cities across the country. But now there's a lot more to do. And I just want to spend a moment talking about how we are addressing, in particular, the challenges that face our youth. We know the impacts of discrimination and inequity can result in housing insecurity, dropout rates, criminalization, the list goes on. And the Unity Project that Ash and the First Lady and so many folks have contributed to are really about getting to the root cause and making sure there's immediate interventions that young people have access to. We know these things work, right? Support services, mental health hotlines, access to counselors. And there's a few initiatives that the Unity Project and the administration are taking on right now that we'd love to share with you. I'd like to talk to you about, and also let's get more support and keep these going in the future and for future administrations. One thing that I know that we've all experienced in different ways, either personally or from our own, friends in queer communities, is family rejection. This is one of, whether you're facing yourself housing insecurity and other structural inequities, family rejection can be a huge cause for a spiral, including, of course, youth homelessness. And the Unity Project is pioneering programs that will really help to curb that, we think, and that will serve as models for not just other cities, but for the nation. They're pioneering a program to train and recruit LGBTQ mental health clinicians of color, critical for family mediation, critical for families and youth to be able to relate to doctors and know so much of what we've learned through COVID is how sacred a person's relationship is with clinicians and with doctors. And along this vein, this is something where families can really find access and comfort. And the administration has also launched a citywide public ad campaign. Some of you may see it. If you haven't, you will, especially around subways and bus shelters, hopefully everywhere, all about destigmatizing LGBTQ youth and promoting family acceptance and support. And this is a basic thing, but we've just started doing it, and we know that this kind of visibility matters. We also know that we have to help youth who are already lacking in housing, not just the ones to prevent it, but those who are homeless. A sort of staggering number, 40% of homeless youth in the city identify as LGBTQIA. It's a disproportionate number, to say the least. And the Unity Project has taken on a whole host of programs and services to address this. Drop-in centers, we know they work, 24-hour drop-in centers. New shelter beds for young people who are between the ages of 21 and 24. Permanent supportive housing. These are the things, they're bedrock, they're fundamental to stability. And the Unity Project, again, and Ash and colleagues have really shown a model that we hope we can build upon. We also know that there's just, and I had touched on this before, the basics of inclusivity and affirmation for our youth, especially when they're getting services. Mitch Katz and his colleagues at H&H have trained over 500 medical providers specifically. And they've created citywide Pride Health Centers with dedicated health services for our LGBTQ community. So again, I think our colleagues have, especially just in the last year and a half, when there have been so many constraints on what we could do, really shown that with creativity and determination and, breaking through any notions of bureaucracy, keep pushing forward. And I truly do hope that so many of you who are going to be advocates and continue doing activism and working from the halls of legislatures and the council next year, urge you to do all you can to support and promote these programs moving forward. And so I'm very optimistic. I think that we all have cause to be at this moment in time. So many of us are getting, across the city are getting vaccinated. Our positivity rates have plummeted. We can sort of see the light at the end of the tunnel. But I also know that we all very badly want to, when we turn the page, show that we've got New York that even more boldly embraces our LGBTQ New Yorkers. And with that, I want to thank all of you. Again, I wish I could be there and I wish we were all in person, but I know we will soon. And happy, happy Pride. Thank you again.
Thank you, Emma. And really a heartfelt thank you for all you have done for the LGBTQIA community over these last 8 years, particularly those who are most at risk throughout the city, and the really extraordinary work that you and the city have done in responding to a once in a lifetime crisis. I know it's been a tough year for everyone. You guys have done heroic work, so thank you on behalf of all of us.
Thank you so much, Brian.
Of course. And with that, I want to introduce a very good friend who I've known for a very, very long time, not to further age us, State Senator Brad Hoyleman. Many of you know him well. Brad is the chair of the Senate Judiciary Committee. He represents New York's 27th State Senate District, which covers much of the heart of Manhattan, including Greenwich Village, Chelsea, Hell's Kitchen, Columbus Circle, Times Square, the Upper West Side, the East Village, Midtown East, and the Lower East Side, and where I'm sitting right now. Brad champions a range of issues such as housing, transportation, public education, LGBTQIA rights, the environment, and seniors. Remarkable senator. I doubt he got very much sleep last night. As many of you also know, it was his primary for Manhattan Borough President. He ran a tremendous race. It is razor thin. It will play out over the next days and weeks as we experience for the first time ranked choice voting and absentee ballots roll in. But as someone who ran a much less close race for Manhattan Borough President back in 2005, Brad, I salute you, I congratulate you, and turn it over to you. Thank you.
Thanks, Brian. Well, now we have something else in common, having run this borough president campaign. You know, Brian, I remember when you ran back in 2005, you were the first openly LGBTQIA candidate, I think, in the nation, definitely the state, who featured an ad and your partner at the time. So that, I think, is really cool and worth mentioning. I also want to thank you, Brian, for your leadership on marriage equality. Now that we're celebrating a decade of it, I remember, again, your creativity and ingenuity around getting corporate America, corporate leaders in New York City in particular, to join the ranks of supporters of marriage equality. And there's really innovative videos that you put together featuring people like Chelsea Clinton that resonated with the public and frankly with my colleagues in the legislature to finally get us over that hump and to become the first legislature in the country to approve it, approve marriage equality as a legislative initiative. So thank you to you, and thank you to the sponsors tonight, Spectrum in particular, Harlem United, which does such great work, Google, TD Bank, Charter, East Midtown Partnership, and the Alley Forney Center, which is, you know, really such an important social services organizations, particularly to our community at this time when homelessness is, you know, on the rise, and particularly among our youth. And thanks to my friend Emma for all of her service over the last 8 years. It's hard to believe it's been 8 years already. I hope the next city administration is as welcoming, not only on issues, but and having LGBTQIA upper management like Emma Wolf. So that's something I'll be watching very closely no matter what happens. And, you know, speaking of the primary, there were so many primary successes last night among city council candidates. We have at least, I think, 4 or 5 maybe new council candidates, possibly 6, depending on how ranked choice goes, who will be joining the ranks of the city council. That was so important because of term limits, we were losing virtually every one of them. So I'm glad to see the ranks of the LGBTQIA city council members being replenished. And of course, we're going to miss Corey Johnson as the second openly LGBTQIA speaker, but who knows? Maybe we'll have another one in the upcoming year. I really want to, you know, to touch on what has happened at the state level, wishing everyone a happy Pride and a happy 10-year anniversary of marriage equality. You know, it changed my life, that's for sure. My husband and I would have never imagined being married when we first met over 27 years ago here in New York City. We would have never imagined being the parents to not 1, but 2 daughters. We're I think the oldest living parents of young children in our first marriage. You know, it's a testament to everyone here, including the media like City and State, who put LGBTQIA issues central in our conversation. And that's, I think, what we can really reflect on is the normalizing of our relationships and the normalizing, you know, of our community through media and in other ways that we communicate. In Albany, you know, we had a real struggle. Of course, getting marriage equality passed was a struggle that Brian and so many other people participated in. Of course, the legislature and the governor, Tom Duane, my predecessor in the Senate, Danny O'Donnell, who carried the bill in the Assembly, still deserve to be mentioned time and time again, as does Deborah Glick, the first openly LGBTQIA member of the New York State legislature. Between that period of June 2011 rather, when New York passed the Marriage Equality Act, and January 2019, when the Senate Democratic Conference took the majority, the Senate passed virtually no LGBTQ specific pieces of legislation. So we had that long, dry period when right after marriage equality, there was such euphoria and what we thought was going to be the opening of a new level of acceptance for our community, but it didn't happen in Albany until the Democrats took over. And that shows you, you know, one giant leap forward, but, you know, many small steps backward that occurred during that period. But thankfully that all changed once the Democratic majority took over and Andrew Stewart Cousins helped make it our agenda in the LGBTQIA community priority. And what we were able to do in the last 3 years is really worth mentioning. The Gender Expression Non-Discrimination Act, for starters, finally extending human rights protections to transgender and gender non-conforming individuals in the state of New York who had been excluded from the human rights law in New York intentionally because folks at that time just, you know, were opposed because of really primitive notions of our community. And so I'm very proud that I helped sponsor that legislation and get it across the finish line with Assemblymember Dick Gottfried. With Assemblymember Glick, we passed a ban on so-called gay conversion therapy. Hard to believe, but it was legal in the state of New York for therapists, licensed therapists, to try to use therapeutic practices to mistakenly convert someone's sexual orientation or gender identity or expression. It was the equivalent of child abuse, of course, but we banned it, thankfully. And with Assemblymember O'Donnell, I passed legislation that banned the so-called gay and trans panic defense. If you had murdered someone in the state of New York, you had a defense to raise that the person who you murdered was transgender or LGBT with QIA. That's also kind of breathtaking that existed on the books, but we repealed it. We've also passed adoption protections for LGBTQ parents. We have LGBTQIA cultural competency training for runaway and homeless youth providers in statute, which is so key. We're following the city's leadership under Emma and the de Blasio administration in requiring gender-neutral restrooms in state buildings. I passed a bill for our LGBTQIA veterans called the Restoration of Honor Act, which restored eligibility for dozens of state veteran programs for our community service members who were thrown out of the military under Don't Ask, Don't Tell. And I was proud to author and pass the Child Parent Security Act, which legalizes gestational surrogacy agreements so that LGBTQIA New Yorkers can start families. But even more importantly, protects women acting as surrogates with something that's called the Surrogate Bill of Rights, so that surrogates who do engage in these contracts are required to have medical and legal assistance and make every health decision for themselves in these agreements. So we've really raised the level of protections for women acting as surrogates and even the families who enter into these agreements and individuals who are struggling with fertility in the state of New York, but I'd argue across the entire country. We also repealed the archaic walking while trans ban. That was the statute that allowed law enforcement to profile women, mostly transgender women of color specifically, just because they were hanging out on a street corner or were wearing skinny jeans and hoop earrings under the guise of loitering for the purposes of prostitution. We struck that from the books this year. I'm very proud of that, and the implications that it leads to protections for communities of color who are LGBTQIA. And legislation I passed just a couple of weeks ago is called the Hate Crimes Analysis and Review Act. It's kind of the other side of the coin of gender, which in addition to human rights protections provided hate crimes protections for transgender individuals. But we wanted to know who was being arrested for hate crimes, and understand this issue more deeply, which is particularly important now that we've seen the spike, and not only in crimes, hate crimes against transgender individuals, but the AAPI community, of course, in recent months during COVID, which has been so appalling. But hopefully it'll allow us to dig into the causes, the root causes of hate crimes by getting this important information. And tomorrow, I'm happy to announce that I've been informed that Governor Cuomo will be signing the Gender Recognition Act, which will be an important step forward in ensuring that transgender individuals, non-binary folks, are able to obtain government identification that reflects their gender identity or expression. And I'm really proud of the efforts of the community in getting this bill across the finish line. You know, all of these bills really are the efforts of advocates. You know, I mean, we start with Sylvia Rivera and Marsha P. Johnson, of course, who sparked the movement for human rights protections for our community at Stonewall, just a few blocks from where I'm sitting. So we honor them as we reflect on the successes over the last decade for marriage equality in every bill I've mentioned, and of course the work that's being done at the city and federal levels. And I join you, Brian, in saying that let's pass the Equality Act. Thanks so much for having me.
Thank you, Senator. Really thankful that you joined us after what had to be a very long night. We wish you the best of luck over the coming days and weeks as the numbers roll in. You ran an extraordinary campaign, and thank you for all you do in Albany to protect vulnerable New Yorkers, in support of the transgender New Yorkers, in support of family creation for our community. We're all really grateful that you're out there fighting for us. So thank you again for joining today.
Thanks again. It's great to see Melissa Sklar's here too, who's responsible for a lot of this legislation getting passed up in Albany.
Absolutely, and that is a perfect segue into my introduction of Melissa, another good friend and fellow battler for equality over many, many years. Melissa, in June of 2020, Melissa became one of the first 2 trans women in New York to be elected Democratic District Leader in the 30th AD in Queens, which is very close to where I grew up. In 1999, Melissa became the first transgender person elected to office in New York when she was elected a judicial delegate from the 66th Assembly District. And in 2016, Melissa was elected to be a delegate to the Democratic National Convention, becoming the first New York trans person ever elected. Melissa also became the first trans elector in the Electoral College that year. And with that, great to see you. and I'm going to turn it over to you. Thank you for all you do for the community.
Thank you, Brian. Well, let me set my little timer. I don't want to overdo it, God forbid. So let's see. I want to thank you, City and State. Thank you, Brian Elner. Thank you, Pride 100. Congratulations to Emma and Brad. I want to, Brian mentioned, I want to mention some of the other trans people that are on this list. I want to give a shout out to Amara and T.S. Candy and Cecilia Gentili and my homegirl Mariah Lopez, and of course Kiara and Chanel, but mostly my impossibly young fellow traveler here in Queens, Amelia D. Cowden. Sorry, I'm much better with Jewish names. Both of us, she's from Sunnyside, I'm from Woodside. As they say, there must be something in the water. So congratulations for all of us representing New York today. I wanted to talk about three things. I'm watching the clock on my microwave. The first is term limits. Wow, what a terrible idea. Who thought of this? How did we get here? Well, of course, we all know. We can go back to 1993 and Ronald Lauder of the Lauder family fortune funded this, and the idea was to create opportunities for non-Democrats to hold office in New York. But a funny thing happened, and I don't really think they looked into it that much, because what we've seen is every 10 years, politics in New York City reinvents itself and it changes. And so what we see, we see energy, passion, and ideas comes up from the streets. And we see a new generation taking their seats in the corridors of power, and to make sure that they have a seat at the table and their voices are heard. And of course, as each generation gets pushed back, they go, well, that's not what we used to do, and this is all wrong, and they don't know anything, and they're too radical. I mean, this happens every time. And we can go back and start with that first new cohort, which is 2001. I was there helping my friend Brad Hoyleman running for city council in 2001, and then 2013, and now, of course, 2021, which was yesterday. And as we see our politics move from Generation X to the millennials to now the Zoomers, and our politics change because our city is changing, and it's a great opportunity, well, sort of, for me to share my experience, but mostly it's important to learn what is happening, what people need, what is that they see, how our city changed, how is our political system not addressing the needs of the people. You know, I have been a mainstream Democrat for a long time, and I become concerned that being a mainstream Democrat is not enough. I've worked with so many different groups of people, and it's probably why I'm on this list. I helped rewrite the patrol guide for the police. I was on the Police Commissioner's Advisory Committee. I've been on the FALA Commission working with judges and all these things. And I get concerned because, as anyone in their 20s can tell you now, our political system leaves too many people behind. You know, what are we going to do about housing? What are we going to do about systemic racism? What are we going to do about the lack of food for people? And so all the needs that each generation thinks they're handling, and yet the needs continue to pile up. You know, this campaign, we saw violence and gun violence, and I'm still convinced that without housing for New Yorkers, we will continue to move in a direction that no one foresaw in 2001 or 2013. And so all of us are going to have to fasten our seatbelts and get ready to hear new ideas. And we can hump for it. It's like, well, that's not how it's supposed to be done. But our way isn't working that great. There are too many homeless. There are too many people with mental illness without resources. There are too few options for those of us that aren't at the top of our social scale. And so we have to be ready to hear new ideas. Now, I am older than a lot of my fellow Pride 100. And if I'm willing to sit and listen to what new people have to say, then hopefully some of you are too. And so that's a good segue into pondering justice. You know, everyone on this Pride 100 list is here because they woke up one day and said, I want to make New York better for people. You know, no one's doing this for the money. I want to make New York better for people. And so all of us have dedicated our lives, some of us in foundations and nonprofits and in politics, some of us just being in the neighborhood. I want to make New York better. And so to do that, we're faced with systemic racism and the need for gender justice. And of course, we have cultural justice, and then we have the war against the poor. And it's really, really important. I mean, all of us in New York, we want to use government to help people. That's why we're here. Ask Emma Wolf, ask Senator Hoyleman. We want to use government to help people. That's what justice looks like. And yet, west of the Hudson, we see this huge cohort of anti-equality people have decided to use government and the law to hurt people. Oh my God, who would ever do that? Why would they use law and government to hurt the powerless? And that's exactly what we're seeing. We now have 117 bills in 33 states that are anti-transgender bills. And they're the kinds of things, well, anti-medical care for trans youth, anti-bathroom locker room bans. Welcome to the zeros. It makes me feel so young again. It's the most anti-LGBT legislation since they started with this 15 years ago. Williams Institute says that 25% of trans minors in America could be affected if these bills become law. The idea of using government not to help people but to hurt people is counterintuitive. It never in a million years would have occurred to me. And that's what they're doing. The attack on voting rights is the attack on our democracy. Without the access to the ballot box, this is what the civil rights movement was about, was the ability to vote, and they're doing it again, and everyone sees it and everyone knows it, and a bitter, aging, white minority of people have determined that this is going to be the hill that they're going to die on, is to make it as hard to vote for Americans as humanly possible. I know that I stand with my other Pride 100 to do everything that we can to convince them that our concern is 2022 and 2024, that our slim grasp of democracy will slip away if we don't take radical action. So I'm concerned as I am willing to do what I can to make sure that they're starting with trans people. And so for the rest of you that are not trans, and I'm looking here, that's a lot of you, they're only starting with us because we are the weakest. And then the people of color are the weakest of the weak. And these are the people that they're going to war against. When they're done with us, they're coming for you. This is not a drill. This is happening, it's happening in real time, and it's up to us, Pride 100, and all of our friends and allies to do more of what they can. And finally, finally, there's a lot of you there. I want to give a shout out to my people at SAGE. SAGE is oldest and largest organization dedicated to improving the lives of LGBT elders. When you think of all the work that's done to help LGBT Americans, you know, helping elders is probably not number one. Actually, it isn't. I am in so many coalitions, you would be horrified to see how many times elder care is at the bottom of the list. Almost every time. Wonderful, well-meaning groups of people at the bottom of the list. SAGE staff are warriors. SAGE staff rolls up their sleeves. Michael Adams and Lynn Faria have created a team of fighters that, knowing full well that, well, we want to work to the future. LGBT elders are the future. They are the future that's happening now. There are probably about 200,000 LGBT people over the age of 65 in New York. And if you're lucky, someday you will be one of them. And what you want to make sure is that if you can't count on your family, if you don't have a spouse, if you don't have kids that are going to put you in the extra bedroom, that you're going to have a place that's going to take care of you instead of being in an old age home or in a homeless shelter because you can no longer afford your unaffordable New York house. SAGE knows this and is fighting this, fighting for housing, fighting for food, fighting for programs and services, creating coalition, bringing people together. And it's amazing to watch. You know, it's an honor and a privilege to be there and to be able to see these people in action. You know, when I started, mostly I had you, my friends, in my big mouth. And now I'm an advocate for aging, you know, and the New York State Office of Aging gets 0.5%. That's the cut that the aging budget is in New York State, and New York City is about the same. And we have our fierce champions in the legislature and City Hall fighting all the time. 0.5% is what goes to aging. So that's really it. This is the end of a long day. I think Brad Hoyleman, I agree with his daughter Sylvia. Brad Hoyleman would be a great president of Manhattan. Manhattan deserves presidents like Brad. I'm in awe to be with all of you today and to have this wonderful opportunity. Thank you, City and State.
Thank you, Melissa. You are an extraordinary warrior, an amazing New Yorker. I could only speak for myself, but I'm sure I speak for everyone, and I see it coming through in the chat. We all stand with you in these fights. Let's work together. The battle is on now. We have to push back against these over 30 cruel anti-transgender laws in 30 states, worst year ever on record. You mentioned the Williams Institute, also the Human Rights Campaign is fighting them. We all need to stay involved and engage. I'm sure all of the Power Pride 100 will. Thank you for all you do. And with that, we're now going to have the reading of the names of those on the power list. It's a City and State New York tradition. Feel free to shout out and congratulate anyone in the chat as we go through the list.
Neil Coleman. Wilhelmina Perry. Stephen Garabel. Jeff Elgart. Sandra Kesh. Kelly McNamee. Anthony Mercurio. David Kilmnick. Arthur Fitting and Shannon Whittington. Biani Garcia and Mateo Guerrero. Kim Forte. John Blasco. Joseph McMillan Jr. Imara Jones. Mila Madison. Rob Burns. Donald Capoccia. T.S. Candy. Joe Presley. Andy Hum and Ann Northrup. Michael Mallon. Jared Arader. John Gallagher. Amit Paley. Norman Simon and Jeffrey Trackman. Peter Staley. Mariah Lopez. David Menser and Allegra Scheinblum. Kathy Marino Thomas and Tanya Asapanza Johnson Walker. Richard Surcardis. Mitchell Drazen. Freddie Milano. Josh Meltzer. Ronald Richter. Doug Worth. Elisa Crespo, Ahmed Mohammed, and Cynthia Dames. Rose Christ. Alan Roscoff. Oriel Gutierrez Jr. Matt Tracy. Ronan Farrow. Sharon Kleinbaum. Jason Littman. Jacqueline Kilmer. Beverly Tillery. Charles King. Kelsey Louie. Wendy Stark. Alexander Roque. Luciano Riberte. Ash McGovern. Sarah Kate Ellis. Andrew Kurtzman. Sasha Neha Ahuja. Michael Adams. Cynthia Nixon. Matthew McMorrow. John Stryker. Jawanza Williams. Teddy Goff. Brian Elner. Charles John O'Byrne. Alan Van Capel. John Del Giorno. Rashad Robinson. Thomas Chernick. Kevin Jennings. Chris Coffey. Ethan Ghetto. Alfonso David. James Krellenstein. David Rich. Ana Oliveira. Bruce Richmond. Emily Giske. William Floyd. Stuart Applebaum. Amelia Descotton. Melissa Sklarz. Carmelyn Malalas and Chanel Lopez. Roberta Kaplan. Christine Quinn. Glenda Testone and Rahul Tripathi. At number 17 are City Council candidates Marty Allen Cummings, Amit Baga, Eric Botcher, Tiffany Caban, Crystal Hudson, Chi Osei, Josh Pierre, Alfonso Quiroz, and Lynn Schulman. Cecilia Gentili. Sally Sussman. Valerie Berlin. Darren Walker. Jabari Brisport. Daniel Drum, Carlos Menchaca, and Jimmy Van Bramer. Now for our top 10, Kiara St. James. At number 9, Randy Weingarten. At number 8, Mitchell Katz. At number 7, Assembly members Harry Bronson, Deborah Glick, and Daniel O'Donnell. At number 6, Emma Wolf. At number 5, Congressman Mondaire Jones. At number 4, Congressman Ritchie Torres. At number 3, State Senator Brad Hoyleman. At number 2, Congressman Sean Patrick Maloney. And at number 1, New York City Council Speaker Corey Johnson.
So thank you all for joining us and celebrating the 2021 Pride Power 100. We very much hope to celebrate in person soon, but appreciate you all joining us for this evening's Zoom. Once again, I want to thank our generous sponsors for tonight, the Ollie Forney Center, which does such amazing work for LGBTQ homeless youth, TD Bank, Charter Spectrum, East Midtown Partnership, Google, and our good friend William Floyd, who was on the list, and Harlem United, which also does extraordinary work for HIV positive New Yorkers. Thank you all again. We made it almost perfectly to 6 o'clock, just a couple minutes over. Everyone, happy Pride, enjoy the weekend, stay safe, and hope to see you soon in person. Have a good night.